What's up? What's up? Shout out everyone. This is Durban, your co-host with Synonyms of Sound.
This is Tony, your second co-host of Cinnamon the Sounds, and I'd like to introduce Kwanza Osajyefo. Hey, Kwanza, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. Pretty
Awesome.
good. Very,
We're doing
very
pretty
excited
good.
to have you on the show.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for having me
I,
on.
I always say that I feel personally, from a representation perspective, that there aren't a lot of great comic characters that are black or are diverse. And coming across some of your work, which I'm just gonna show out here real quick. Huge fan of some of the work that you have here. But before we get into these gems, would love to know a little bit about the pre-story before this thing all happened. So tell us a little bit from where you're originally from and a little bit about yourself.
Wow, I feel like that's going to be like a long origin story, but I'll try and keep it short.
Origin
As
stories
short
are
as
important.
possible.
It's super important for
Um,
every superhero, as we know.
yeah, so I'm from Brooklyn, New York, born and raised, still live in New York, and I grew up like loving comic books from like a really young age, so it's like, my dad, my cousins, like there's always like some comic books to be found and discarded or like hidden somewhere, and I was very much a bookish kid growing up. So like I didn't necessarily want to go out and play all the time. It's just like some days I was just like, what you got to read? And I
Gotcha.
didn't care if it was like Archie. It was just like
Archie's a
I just
classic. Archie's a classic.
no, but I mean, just like if it was there, I was reading it. So like
Gotcha.
I read like Richie Rich, Archie, just whatever. Like one of my favorites, or Pogo, was a comic that I really enjoyed when I was a kid. Even though I didn't get the political jokes, it
Mm-hmm.
was just something that I gravitated towards. But I think it was really the first thing that really caught my eye and made me like really start thinking about comics as a medium was a collected edition of the Asgardian Wars that was drawn by like Art
Mm.
Adams and stuff. That's when like X-Men, they go to Asgard and stuff. Storm becomes like the goddess of thunder, and that was just like a really wild kind of like thing that blew my mind. Art wise, story wise, it was just something that really spoke to me and really made me think like, oh right, I've passed by stores before that have these things in there. Like it just
Mm-hmm.
kind of like clicked. Um, but I don't think it was really until probably I was in my like teens and stuff. I continued to read comics. So I started reading stuff like like Power Pack, Batman, like all the classics, X Men, kind of, you know. And I don't think it was until like Milestone hit the scene that I realized two things. One was that I was absent from comic books, and that when I say me, I mean like a black person. Like before then, like all those characters I named, those are all white people, and that's what you like grew up reading. That's like what you identified with, but you didn't see yourself there. So when
Mm-hmm.
Milestone kind of hit, it was the first time you saw like Static and Icon, Hardware, and
Yeah.
like the Blood Syndicate, and that was the second click in my brain where I was just like, yo, wait a second. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that's right. There's no like really cool like black characters out there, and you get tired of your friends always being like, okay, you're gonna be like John Stewart. I'm like, I don't
Some
want to
villain,
be John
yeah.
Stewart. Yeah, like, I don't want to be John Stewart. He's corny. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So that was the first time that really clicked to me. And then the third thing that clicked was that this was an actual job,
Mm-hmm.
because it was the first time I really looked at the credits and then looked at the indication. I was like, yo, these are real people. These are real black people who are making
Mm-hmm.
these. This isn't made by like magical, like, keeper elves and stuff. This is like a job you can have. And like from right in that moment, I was like, this is something that I want to do with my life. I love this medium. I love the fact that this is something that is achievable. And crazy enough, I also saw Milestone's address and phone number in that indicia. So I decided to just call them on the phone and lie. Hey, I mean, I'm in high school. I was like, hey, I'm the hot new artist and stuff like that. I'm a comic book writer. I'd love to come and like pitch my stuff. I had no stuff. I mean, I had stuff, but I didn't know what a professional portfolio looked like. So, I was a poor kid. I found like a portfolio in the trash, cleaned it up, and
Mm-hmm.
put all my drawings and scribblings and stuff I had come up with on my typewriter and stuff. I mean, nothing that I think was necessarily ready for prime time, but I walked in there like I was. So I got an appointment with Milestone to come meet and pitch my work, and I'm just like, oh, I don't even know. Like I'm like 16, 17 years old. So I walk in there,
Wow,
and
man.
it's not even like it wasn't even like, oh yeah, here go talk to this editor. They brought me in to sit with Dwayne McDuffie, and so here I am sitting across from the man himself, like editor in chief of Milestone, and he's like, show me what you got. Like, not doesn't miss a beat, and I like show him like my work. He looks through all of it and stuff like that, nods a little bit and stuff, and very very nicely pushes my portfolio back across the table. It's like, yeah, I don't know if you're ready yet, kid. But what he did after that is
Uh,
like, he took some time to like really ask me like, why do I want to be in comics? What do I know about the industry? And he basically kind of gave me the crib sheets, like the green book for navigating the comics industry, like what shows to go to, what editors like pitch, and really cleared up the fact that, hey, you're also a person of color. There's a reason we're over here and we're not over there in the DC offices. So, he kind of gave me the game before I got in the game, and I took that information, went to college and stuff like that, and used that to get an internship at Marvel, and then got hired there right out of school. So that's kind of like my origin story in terms of like what started my comic book career.
I mean,
Nice.
that is a fantastic origin story, and I mean, at 14 or 16 to call and say like I'm the next big deal, like I need to like show you my stuff is, I mean, gutsy, ballsy. Like, I mean, you must have had some level of confidence, which I love it. I love it.
I think I had that like Elmer Fudd kind of, I don't know that there's gravity kind of confidence. It's just like
I like
it's like
that.
I'm gonna just walk up here. I don't know any better. If somebody had told me, I'd have been like, oh man, I'm gonna go like take a L. But instead, I just walked in there because I was really passionate about it. I didn't have any mentors or anybody who could teach me the craft, but just for that a little amount of time that Dwayne McDuffie afforded me completely changed my life because like copious notes, like it's like, oh, I got to do what? I got to go where? I got to watch out for who? Yeah, absolutely. And I know for a fact that I wouldn't have a career in comics if it hadn't been for that one day.
Wow, that's amazing.
And what was the Marvel internship like?
It was interesting. I think with that, one of the things. So I started at Marvel Online. So of course, just like anybody who comes into Marvel, you want to get that
Mhm.
editorial and get near the comics and making
Yeah.
comics and stuff like that. But surprisingly, I actually developed an immediate love for online. I saw the opportunities there to like do some innovative storytelling and push the medium forward in a way that couldn't be necessarily done on printed paper, and that sort of became like my niche within the industry. So, after I left Marvel, then I came back into comic books after a sort of a break to head up DC's online webcomics imprint. And so they
Mhm.
launched, this thing called Zuda. It was like a competition. It was the first time that anybody could honestly pitch work to DC and then get a series if they get voted by the public. So it was an innovation in a lot of ways and stuff like that. Kind of like the American Idol for
Yeah,
comic
but
books.
giving the I guess your audience the power to seeing what they want to see more of. I love that idea. Like you put out a concept and then the audience gets to vote on what they want, and you at least know there's a large interest of what is going to be created. And that's a smart
Yeah,
idea.
and it was also a really good way to like bring in talent that hadn't had access before. So a lot of our launch titles were of color, they were LGBTQ, like, and this is before, it was really about any sort of like DEI work being done
Yes.
internally. This was
Mhm.
just me being sly and being like, well, I'm here, I'm gonna put some black people on.
Let's get it
You know,
done. Let's get it done.
yeah,
Let's get
tell
it
your
done.
friends to be like, you need to enter this, like,
Awesome. From that program, is there anyone that you remember that used that platform that you thought was like that really helped their career take off? If anyone that comes to mind, or that someone you're really
um,
proud of that you already see, like, you know what, I kind of helped this person get this shot or this exposure.
Uh, I think a lot of them, because all of those guys were hungry. So Jeremy Love was already in the game. I just happen to be a big fan of his. His book Bayou, I think, is going to be coming out with another publisher. Um, I don't know if that's been announced yet, so I'll keep that information to myself. David Gallagher with High Moon, also trying to think Dan Govar, who's just like a prolific like art fantasy artist and stuff. And then, a lot of the guys have moved on to other stuff, working at Disney and doing all sorts of like really cool stuff. Bobby Timoney, I think he's about to have a book with the Super Pets come out from DC, which is really
Mm,
weird because, he had been like the kind of artist who didn't quite fit the mold there. But then once their graphic novel line started blowing up and they started thinking about their IP in different ways, then
hmm
then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now this is somebody you could really put on. Whereas before it's like, well, you can't draw Batman this way. We don't really have any space for you. But now it's like,
Got it.
oh, but you can draw like Super Pets really well. Well, let's go.
Yes, got it, got it, got it. Makes sense, makes sense, makes sense.
So I'd love to just kind of learn, I guess, the inspiration around Black. Uh, like how I know there's there has to. I'm sorry. Let me formulate my question real
He's
quick.
geeking out right
Right?
now because the concept is super dope. So I get where he's
No
coming
worries,
from.
no worries.
Nah, the concept is more than dope. The concept is crazy, actually. I think it's like crazy in a good way. Like, um, I can't read. I can't wait to like just like read more of your work. Full transparency, Tony. Big fan. He put me on. You know what I mean? But what was the inspiration that led to Black? Like, I wanna know what led up to that. Like what was, I guess, the experience that you had that was like, you know what,
Well,
I need to put or create this story.
well, there are a few things. I think there's a shared experience that Black people have in America of like how we're regarded, in terms of like policing, in terms of like equity and inclusion, and it's essentially we've had like the most lethal PR campaign going against us since we arrived, on slave ships. So there's that aspect, which is just sort of ever present. But on top of that, there was a mix of sort of my passion and love of comic books and the medium, along with the fact that as I became a professional in the field, I realized that there was also an absence of Black people in the industry. So it wasn't necessarily something that was this Machiavellian like, oh, we're going to keep Black people out. It's just we weren't in. You know, like I got in through just being again like purposefully ignorant. Like it was like I wasn't thinking about I can't. I was thinking about I'm going to. These are things
Yeah.
that I want. But that was part of like circumstance. But once I was in the building, I realized I was the only one often in the room, and that was something that struck me because it's like if we're not here, then that's exactly why we're not in the comics. That's why we're not represented our
Makes
race, our
sense.
culture. Like none of that is coming through because it's not even on these people's purview. When you're in a room full of just white dudes, what are you going to get except more white dudes? You in your comics,
Yep,
that's what you're going to
true.
get.
And that's not their
So
fault too. So I mean, that's a good point. If you're not there, you can't speak up. So it makes sense.
yeah, and it's just not a climate or a culture for that sort of like thing to really become rooted in anybody's like publishing plan or to even come through authentically because we've seen when it hasn't. So I'm not even going to go
Mhm.
there, but it was sort of like it was an amalgam of those three things coming together, and me starting to look at these comics that I grew up and I loved reading and saying like, there's always these outcast sort of archetypes. These people who are like not regarded well by society, but then they also tend to be like billionaires or they just have a suit they can take off whenever they want, or it's like nobody's pulling them over,
hmm
and like talking about their tail lights and stuff like that just because they happen to, be a certain class or whatever. And even when you look at characters like the Thing, it's like the Thing is living his good life. Like, yeah, maybe it sucks to be a big orange brick, but you're a famous like globe-trotting like superhero. So it really stuck to me that like, these tropes were kind of hollow because
Yeah.
they didn't really reflect what it's like to have an institution against you, to have real prejudice that you can't overcome with like shooting laser beams out of your eyes.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it really made me think about it in terms of like things that I love, like the X-Men and stuff like that. I was like, well, what if only Black people had superpowers? And I kid you not, the minute I thought that thought, I was like,
This is something
oh.
gold. This is something gold.
And so like I started crafting this story back then, and it was like kind of 10 years I sat on it because again I started working at DC and didn't really have time to pursue writing. But once I left, I still had the idea percolating in my head, and my wife was just like, "Look, you got a lot of ideas, but just pick one and do it." And that was the one that I picked. So I hit up a colleague of mine, Tim Smith, who I'd worked with at Marvel, and I was just like, "Hey, man, I got this idea. I really like your art style because Tim draws and designs characters from a very different aesthetic that's not influenced by a lot of like Western like comic book design. He's got his own feel and flavor to it, and things feel like they have weight and like texture." And I was like, "I think you could help me design like some really black kind of superheroes, It's like nobody's going to be wearing tights and capes in this story." So um, he was on, and then like I approached Jamal Igle, kind of told him the idea, and I was like, "What if only black people had superpowers?" He's like, "Yep, let's go." Showed Kari, I just showed Kari like a little mobile site that I made on my phone, and all he saw was a tagline. He's like, "Nah, man, let's go. Like this is
Yes.
yeah." He's like, "'Cause you only do stuff like this once,
Yes.
so let's go." And that's kind of how it took off. And things have changed. So I did a Kickstarter for it. We were asking, I think, for like $30,000. We ended up at 90, and we hit that goal in like 3 days. So it was something that I think really resonated with people once it like kind of came out, and we got like all sorts of write-ups in newspapers and stuff. So it was really good to be validated in that way, because I also knew that the idea for Black is not something that I would have been able to go to a publisher with and have to
Yeah.
be like, "Yeah, that sounds great," especially not a comic book publisher, because as much as, things may progress, like in a lot of industries, they can get like very stagnant because there's not a lot of movement. So it's
Hmm.
like those rooms where I would be the only Black person just kind of stayed that way, and it wasn't because people were like keeping other people out. They just were never leaving. So it's like there's
Got it.
never room for you to come in there and be like, "I'm a new kid," like.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So one of the things I must say, and maybe we can go back a little bit in history. I feel that if you think about Disney and other shows, when they represent black characters, it's always a very big lips, dark, dark, dark skin, crazy looking eyes. Like it's never really portrayed the way that they portray other characters that they design. And I felt with your design, it kept the true essence of like how black people normally look. They don't have the crazy looking, complexion or the lips and stuff like that. So can you talk to me a little bit about, seeing that kind of stuff and how it influenced the design you put in Black or in all your comics?
Definitely. So, the entire team, we definitely had sort of a come to Jesus sort of moment where we had to realize that as professionals who had all been working in the industry for, 10, 15, 20 years between us, that, we had all done a lot of work on white characters. So even for us, there was a moment where we had to like take pause and like really look at like what the Black aesthetic needed to be in the book.
Hmm.
And there were even points where like it even came down to we had meetings about hair texture, or just like, "Hey, you can't put these kind of box braids on like on this girl. That's not going to work. You're going to get clowned out of like out of
Hmm.
the streets. We got to make sure that this like looks right." It's like so. It was very much us kind of like reevaluating, how we approach this stuff. And it's also why I really wanted to work with Jamal, because he's such a detailed and refined artist. I knew that he could handle, drawing people of, different hair textures, different skin tones, different facial features, but they are still Black because it's not a monolith. It's not like one type of like look defines like Blackness. So it was that, and the reason why like we decided to do the comic book in grayscale too, because I wanted people to focus on the story and not get overly focused on rendering and stuff like that. So it's just like, if you think your character is darker skin, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But it's like you'll have to bring that to the table yourself.
Got it. Awesome. Awesome. And I know you mentioned that meeting when you went to when you were 16. I think at that time and age, if you were to like, if you did have a mentor, I felt like someone would be like, you're not ready yet. Take your time. Like you'll get there eventually. Do you think that the lack of, doubt that other people may have portrayed on you would have potentially held you back from doing it? Or you just had the self-confidence to just know, like, I'm just ready and I just want to get in the room and talk about my stuff?
Maybe, maybe not, because I didn't come from a family where it was ever a choice. Like I didn't have
Hmm.
that. I didn't have that. I didn't have that mom who was just like, it's like, all right, what are you gonna do after high school? She was like, so college. It wasn't
Right.
like it wasn't like, oh, you are going. You better find the one you're going to. That's kind of it. Um, so I didn't come from like, at least in my home, I didn't come from a place of no, so it made it easier to sort of like weather other people saying no about certain things because if I felt passionate about something, I was just gonna go for it. And comic books and writing was something I loved, something that I felt like I could do. I even used to draw a little bit. I did give that one up just because I was like, this is hard. I can't. I got to pick a lane here. So I stuck with writing.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
So where do you, I guess, where would you love to see this go in terms of growth or scale? Like, are you thinking movies, TV shows? Like, what would you, I guess, love to see this evolve to?
Well, we did get optioned by Warner Brothers for a feature film, so there's definitely going to be a film based on the Black universe. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. I've seen some takes on the universe that have been really kind of cool and mind blowing when you see somebody else take an idea of yours and you're just like almost mad a little bit because you're just like, oh, I didn't think of doing that. I've had some conversations where I was like, well, since you based it on my story, I'm going to steal that. I mean, technically, I wrote it.
Yes.
Technically, I'm just going to. And, currently I'm working on the final chapter of the main arc. So Black is like a trilogy. The first book, Black, is the one that you showed. And then White came out at the end of last year, which is a sequel to that. And I believe the trade is coming out next month, perhaps. And then we'll be doing a final book in the future, and that'll kind of just wrap up the larger arc. Whether or not there's more stories in between will depend on my time and stuff. But there's definitely more stories to tell, and that's kind of like what you saw with like Widows and Orphans and America's Sweetheart. I just wanted to kind of show the breadth and depth of the world outside of that main arc with like different characters and stuff like that.
Awesome, man.
Nice. Congratulations on the Warner Bros. Move. I was not aware, and I'm very, very happy for you on that end. I cannot wait to see what they do with that. It's going to be dope.
Yeah, it's been pretty cool. Like, it's been a process, but I get to be a producer on it, so I get to see and hear a lot of, different visions of my vision, and it's always like exciting to just, see certain things. And I'm pretty excited about where things are right now. I think it's gonna make for like a really cool and interesting feature film.
I mean, that's awesome. So I guess feature film is probably the dream of any artist, writer, comic book writer. But before we get to that level of success, I know you mentioned that you got a lot of like advice, great advice. Now that we're building an audience, like could you share some advice for someone that is trying to get into the comic game? It should they go the mainstream route, get that exposure, get that knowledge, and then kind of venture off on their own, like you did? Like, kind of walk us through your thoughts about that kind of stuff and advice you would give someone.
I think it depends on like what you're comfortable with, and what your ultimate goal is. I think, a lot of people tend to walk that line between working for like the bigger publishers to sort of like, increase their visibility. But there's been a lot of really successful creators out there who've just, forged ahead with their own thoughts and IP and stuff like that and made a name for themselves. So, and sometimes that's the only path because you're not going to see like Jeff Smith's Bone come out of Marvel. I mean, they might today because they're more Disneyfied. But I mean, like, when he had that idea, like, and that story that he really wanted to tell, that was something that he had to find his own path for. And I think you see a lot of that with like Image and stuff like that. I think, if what you're really trying to do is build your visibility, like, do it however you feel is best. Like, if you don't feel like working for a publisher is like right for you, then don't go that route. But if
Mhm.
that's something that you want to do, like that's fine too, because those are fun toys to play with, and they pay you. So like, do your thing. So I can't really say that there's one direct path, but there's also just so many more tools out there and opportunities. Like so for
Hmm.
for me, it was Kickstarter. I was able to validate my idea through the public's eyes rather than sit there and wait for some gatekeeper to give me permission, or wait for them to be comfortable with this sort of storytelling for it to happen. So I think just, hustle, find your way in.
Gotcha. And what were some of the? I know you mentioned that your mentor had mentioned like you should go to these events or these like venues. What would you recommend for someone in this day and age where comics are becoming more digital and there's tons of different events and tons of different things happening? Like, what are some that you recommend someone trying to get into the game today to attend or network at?
Well, I think it depends on what kind of artist you are. So for writers, I think that it's a little bit more of a uphill climb, but writers also have more of the ability to take on more projects at once. So I think, once you establish those relationships and people can see that like you're producing really interesting and engaging stories that sell, they'll be more apt to hire you for stuff, or that'll, make you more appealing to an agent or something like that, I guess. For illustrators, I tend to think that like, with the ability to kind of like get your art out there on places like social media, like that's the strong place to like really show what you're capable of, and build an audience for yourself. And whether that's doing pinups or if you really want to do like, sequential art, like showing like your illustrated boards, like just show people what you can do is really a key, and be consistent and keep doing it, because that's also the thing that anybody who's going to consider hiring you for a project wants to see as well, is that you're able to consistently generate, you know, work and stuff like that, because that's going to be the job. Don't let anyone
Makes
fool
sense.
you. It's like you're about to draw a 20-page comic book in like 6 weeks if you're lucky, So you better be on your game.
Got it. Got it.
Has, has there any, I guess, like with your time in the industry, for example, right? And I guess this is a tricky question because you probably won't be able to drop any names or say too much, but I guess have you ever like observed or like been in a meeting and someone pitched a project and the idea was just like so dope, but it was shut down and
Um,
never got to see the light. Like how I imagine that happens pretty often.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, like for me, fortunately, I've been blessed in that I've been able to forge my own path and not necessarily have too many people in my way.
Yeah.
So like when I was at DC, I kind of had carte blanche to like just put out stuff that I thought was dope. So I got lucky in that regard. And then online, like nobody in publishing was really paying attention to what we were doing, so we just got to do some cool stuff. But I did hear some wild stuff where, I just feel like they're going to put out what? Like, or it's like, oh, why aren't they putting out this? So, I mean, I want to say that, when it comes to like ideas, it's subjective, but
Mhm.
there's also like the rank and file and the institutions that may like have agendas or lack it, like, certain imagination for things.
Mhm.
Whereas, when you really think about like what we're doing out here, it's surprising. It's a surprising position to have when you're seeing that things like, Captain Underpants, Dogman, and Smile are like the top selling actual graphic novels and comics out there. But if somebody comes to, a superhero publisher with something that's a little avant-garde, you'll meet hesitation, and it's sort of like, you guys got to take your blinders off and stuff like that, and think a little bit bigger and a little bit broader. Some publishers used to be really good at that, but aren't as much. But then there's also a lot of publishers out there, small, independent, where you just find a place where you can tell that story, or tell it yourself, because you can do that kind of stuff online now. Go post it on Webtoons. If you've got that fire, like get it out there.
And how much do you think like doing something like that independently, right? Like how much do you think that can cost someone?
It depends on what you're doing, but there is generally a cost. Like there are many days where I wish I had kept up with like drawing so I could draw my own stuff. It would probably save me a lot of time and money. Well, it might not save me time. It would definitely save me money, because like, drawing is laborious, and like I do not. I am always in awe and admiration of my illustrator friends and not envious of them because, they really do carry the bulk of production, in the work that they do. But I think that, it depends. Your average independent comic book, can run you anywhere from like, if you have a good relationship with those people and it's not a big team, like $100 a page to, $300 a page. So, you
Wow.
start doing the math and you're like, okay, because people got to eat. You can't ask people to work for free,
True.
and depending on your reputation and like what you're actually producing and like how it's going to come out, you're not going to get like, people to say like, oh, okay, well, I'll do it for like a cut of the profit and stuff like that. It's like people have bills. So like I try to respect my entire creative team's time and like pay them, like what they should be
What
paid,
is you? Yeah, it
like
makes
as
sense.
best as I can pay them, and they understand that. So hopefully I'll be able to pay that back, with the film, like, highlighting all of our reputations, do some red carpets or something like that. It might be nice if that could happen, to come out there and stunt. But
Durbin, I was gonna say, how lucky are we that we get him just before the movie comes out? So when people Google him, they're gonna find this podcast and tie it back and like. So we kind of hit the jackpot early. So this is kind of funny, but this based on what you're saying, I do agree with it. It is important to give the people that help build you up their flowers,
Absolutely.
which I totally agree with that. Definitely.
One thing that we've been talking about with a lot of our guests, and a lot of folks, make an impact in their respective fields, but uh, the point that the trend that I've been noticing is the opportunity that we've had to connect with folks who like um, are doing awesome things in a space where folks from the community might not know that they have access to that space, right?
yeah,
And like seeing someone who looks like you do that stuff, it really goes a long way. And it's me being someone who used to draw, right? Who is really into superheroes and all of that. This what you're doing is so inspiring. It really is, and I know that there's going to be some kids who pick that up, and there's going to be even more inspiring work that comes from that because they read that. And I just want
I
to make
hope
sure I
so
let you know.
because no, well, thank you, and I hope so because that's sort of like what I feel like milestone passed on to me. I'm glad that they are back in DC and being published again, but it's really one of those things that was, I think, so transformative for a lot of people at the time that like, you know, I don't think I speak for myself because I've had this conversation with my colleagues who are of color where it's just like we felt like their absence required us to carry the baton. Like it was a relay.
Mm,
It's like you guys went, but we're going to take this and we're going to run with it. We're going to bring that energy into other projects and stuff. And then, with the success of Black and then, other, comics started popping up with like featuring characters of color like Bitter Root, like, and, Black Panther came and like stole everybody's like hearts and minds and money and stuff. So it was
I
just like
know.
we were having quite the Black Renaissance at the right time. But I think the key thing that came out of it is that it wasn't just that these were Black stories; it was that Black stories had value.
Yeah.
Because
Hmm.
everybody talks green, and when you can sit there and hit certain numbers or grab certain attention or like come up with a
Yeah.
certain concept that really speaks to people, I think that people realize it's like, oh, this isn't just like a fluke. And I think in particular for Black people, it's because our stories haven't been told. It's like you're just talking about a whole like huge untapped resource of storytelling where you can be doing something really different across mediums in terms of like what what you tell people because it's been pretty rote because it's all been through like a white lens generally
Yeah.
focused on
Yeah.
white people, white stories. So when you have that, you're kind of limiting what people have access to. And I think that's why these things resonated with people because they're like, oh, I've never seen that before. There's a lot of
Hmm.
things that people can ignore because they're just like, oh, I've seen that before. It's
Hmm.
like it's the
Yeah.
it's the difference between like Star Trek, Discovery, and whatever the latest Star Trek is. It's like, oh wait, no, Captain Michael. Oh, she's still existed. Oh wait, did it take a whole
No,
three seasons to become
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was yeah. That's a good point. That's a
No,
good point.
that
Yeah.
show held me too because I was like, she's supposed to be the captain. Come on, let me see these
Yep,
people.
yep. Yeah. And she's a great actress too. I haven't finished it,
Absolutely,
but the
man.
season I watched, the 2 seasons I watched, I was like, this is pretty good. This is really good. But I wanted to touch on something that you talked about. So I remember as a kid, I remember Captain Planet. They had that one black kid that was the heart power. I'm like, they gave the kid heart. I'm like, really? All right, cool. I was like, all right, that's fine, that's fine. And then we got,
I don't think that kid was black. I think he was indigenous.
oh,
The
okay.
black
So,
kid, the black kid had earth power.
okay, Earth.
Kwame.
Okay, okay. I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember, but I was like, Earth. Okay, cool. So that was better than heart. That like I was trying to remember, but yeah, he had Earth.
Yeah.
Then we got Static Shock, which I thought was super cool. In WB11, you got to wake up super early. You have like 30 minutes, and that was like really cool. So I know recently they re-released Static Shock, and I think Nicholas, I can't remember, I think his last name is Draper, recently helped them redesign Static Shock and the feel, his artwork. I thought it was super dope. Big fan of his stuff. Are there any like stories that you would want to like give a twist on that is in like DC or Marvel today that you think you can give it a different perspective coming from your background?
Definitely. I mean, I've always been down with Milestone. They know it. Reggie
Hmm.
Hudlin, Nick, like, in this particular case, when it comes to comic books, all black people do try to know each other
Yes,
because it's just like
it's
there's only a few of us here, so it's just like
it's like in
see
tech.
you,
Black folks in
you
tech.
know?
There's only a few of us in
Yeah,
tech,
it's like
so
Yeah.
so. It's something that I will always be down for and stuff like that. Should the opportunity arise. But in terms of like anything mainstream, I don't necessarily know that there are any characters that I prefer to be a reader of those things.
got it.
I feel like my perspective and the way that I approach things would probably not sit well with
Okay.
folks, or at least it wouldn't until they feel like they can't say no, you
Mm,
know? So it's like maybe after the film, maybe after like, a couple of follow-up projects and stuff like that, then it'll be like, oh, okay, well, I guess we got to do what this guy wants to do. But
got it.
I think I think before then they still feel like, oh no, this IP can't, be but this. But you know, I like radical change. I like characters that move, forward and stuff. Like I do not like stagnation. So anything that I did in the mainstream, you would definitely see an evolution like of those characters. And to give you some examples of things that I really liked or that resonated with me, it's like I really like where the X-Men are right now with the whole Krakoa thing. Because I'm like, yeah, this is getting boring, after a while. We know the X-Men story. Everybody fears and hates you except you're all hot white people. Go ahead. But then they really felt themselves. They were just like, nah, y'all are legit trying to kill us. We just gonna not only create our own nation, but then we're also gonna like take over the world economy. And I was just like, okay, okay. But then I also liked the Future Foundation, when essentially, the whole Fox thing made them like rethink the Fantastic Four. I was like, this is great. This is an interesting evolution of them having like a little nerd science school and stuff like that, and like getting back into the sci-fi explorer stuff, or like you know, kind of like right the Superior Spider-Man stuff, and like right when Peter came back, where I was just like, yeah, he should own his own web company. He made Spider Fluid. Like this kid's a
Hmm.
genius. He should be Mark Zuckerberg. Like the broke off Spider-Man don't hit for me anymore. It's like that. It's like he can't be sleeping on people's sofas and stuff. You didn't save the world like dumb times. Like this is
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yes.
So that's me when I look at these characters. Like, I want to see like where should they be right now. So like, if I got Green Lantern, the first thing I do is get Hal Jordan a job. He been broke for like dude, you don't work. You don't work. You show up in front of like your girl's house and stuff like that after being in space and wonder why she's mad at you and stuff like that. You used to be a pilot, now like how you living? You know?
Yeah. I feel you. I feel
So
you. I
it's
feel
like
you.
things like that. Like I'd like to really like dive into and kind of explore like why are you the best Green Lantern? It's like what makes you better than like any of the other 20 that
Yes.
exist. Be they from Earth or alien. It's like so it's those kind of things that like I'd really want to delve into. So I'm kind of curious what I tangentially have been seeing over at DC with all of the like diversity and inclusion stuff that they've shifted to with their like lineup. Um, but I need to read some of it. I've read a bit of the Superman stuff, and I think that that's great. But it's like they're going all in, you know,
Mhm.
like Wonder Woman's like South American, like Green Lantern's a black lady, you know, Aquaman's black and gay because you know we can't just carry one thing. And then it's
Yep.
like think well, what else? Yeah, and Batman's black, which that one doesn't sit with me too well. I'm just like, I don't know.
I'm
A
not,
black
I'm
man
not,
isn't going to take
I don't know about that
billions of
one either.
dollars and just yeah. I was like, he's not going to take billions of dollars and just go around slapping people up on the streets. That's not Black Batman. I'm sorry, it's just not. It's just not. Oh, let me drive around in a whip and just like beat people up. mm, mm. And you
It's
know he doesn't wear the mask. I'm like, you're gonna get checked too. You're gonna be out in the middle of Gotham, like you know, slapping up some thugs. And they'll be like, oh, it's like that now, huh, Batman? I see you. You oh, you black? You still okay? Okay, cool.
Oh man.
if what superpower would you want if you had an opportunity to choose?
I've always been envious of the Flash, so I think I would want super speed, like Speed Force stuff, where I could just do anything and everything at like high speed. Because I feel like
Okay.
there's never enough time in a day, and I feel like that's why I never liked Barry Allen because it's like, man, you got all these dope powers, and you're just like so limited in your perspective. Like Wally was the goat. Like Wally did stuff. Like he invented the Speed Force essentially, and then like all the speed tricks. Like before then, Barry was just running. Like that's what he did. Oh, you're running the wall. Let me make some fucking tornadoes. But it's like that was something that I really look forward to, especially when Mark Wade was writing and stuff like that. To always see like, oh, what different nifty neat tricks are you going to do with speed? You know, and like that stuff was always intriguing to me. So yeah, super speed, but none of that
Uh,
time travel mess because everybody should know better.
yeah, I agree. I agree. So I like that. I like what you touched on there, like doing more than just the traditional expectation. So when you design a universe or a character or start writing, like what are some of the things that you're thinking about as you go into that process for like someone that's trying to build their own comic book? Like what are some of the things you think that they should start thinking of as they develop this world?
Well, I think the first thing you want to do is you want to kind of establish your rules so that when you break them, the reader actually feels like something extraordinary has happened, you know? But also it helps you ground like how the characters are going to navigate certain things. So like when we were designing the characters for Black, you know, I was very, even though I don't draw anymore, I was very like invested in doing like my little poor sketches and being like, oh, they could have this and that because I felt like as characters, they might have very stylistic or cool, like you know, the drips was going to be on fire, but like it wasn't going to be spandex. You know, it's like how would a black superhero or a black like supernatural character carry themselves? You know, so it was a lot of like you know leather. It was a lot of black. It was a lot of like fabrics and stuff like that, and they had influences in terms of like fashion and individual style. You know,
Hmm.
so like the way Base dressed, you know, was very inspired by like you know more urban cultures. Like this is I was like she's someone who's from like you know the projects and stuff like that. This is how she's gonna dress. You know, and then you'd have a character like Indigo who's like, you know, biracial and stuff like that, and a little bit more like posh and, you know, and introvert is like, okay, so she's gonna have more of a simple silhouette and like an asymmetrical haircut, you know, like there was a different like swagger. And then even Kareem, the protagonist, I was like, you know, he's kind of I wanted him to still feel and look young, so there was a lot of anime influence in like his like outfit and really just trying to give him something that didn't make him seem like, you know, childish but still young. Because I never really liked those stories where all of a sudden like a teenage kid becomes like, you know, really clever. Like I
Hmm.
maintain the fact that he's pretty dumb. You got to the first story. Like he doesn't, you know, he doesn't really like he learns the hard way. And I think that that's like one of those things that you don't often see where it's like they have like teen characters grow up like too fast because of the story. Where it's like
Yeah.
I kind of just brought him to a point where he had to make one big choice in the whole story and like realize like what like was required like by the very end of him as opposed to it like midway being like I'm the chosen one. I got it. It's like no, I made dumb mistakes. You know, like
Gotcha.
no, I made two dumb mistakes. I'm gonna just keep making mistakes.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So I know, like in every story, there's certain things that people might overlook or kind of go over their heads. As you are developing Black and continue to come to the end of the series that you're developing, or the main arc of what you're developing, what is the main message that you want your readers to really take away as you character build until the end? And is there any like sub character that you were really trying to highlight as well with the main character?
Um, I think that like the way that I tried to structure the story is that even though Kareem or X is the protagonist, he's not the sole perspective. Like he is the reader's along the ride with him, but I really tried to set up the dynamic of him and O and Juncture and Theodore Mann as more opposing philosophies or like like perspectives rather than like, oh, this one's definitely the bad guy, this one's definitely the good guy. And I try to have that show up in the first book where Kareem and Juncture have, a real conflict of like, differences where he's just like, no, what you're doing isn't right either. And I don't know if I can trust you. And, these are the two good guys. And then he meets, a quote unquote, what would be a bad guy who's not necessarily doing a bad thing, but maybe he's going about it the wrong way, but like
Mm-hmm.
it's those gray lines and those moral, like contexts that I think make for like more interesting characters rather than just saying like, oh, this person's wrong or this person's bad. Like, I'd rather reduce it to like, oh, this person's just an asshole. Like, that's a reason for them to do something like in a certain way. They might not necessarily be bad all the time. So it was really interesting for me to explore that. And in White, I was definitely through Thaddeus Man trying to explore, generational like, trauma and also generational hate because I was really intrigued, unfortunately, by like, Trump's sons and what a bad product they are, in terms of like what was taught to them, like how they regard the world and stuff like that, but also where that comes from because it's a manufactured thing. It's like it's parenting, and it's this interesting disregard where it's just like when it's brought into the conflict of the rest of the world, is where you get like these loud, braggadocious or contrary like figures like them, going up against the rest of us. So in that book, it's like him going up against, X, who's, gotten a little smarter, gotten a little wiser, and it is like embarrassing him, essentially. Like he's
Mm.
like this, he's supposed to be this perfect product of like his parents and stuff like that, and he's just getting clowned by who he sees as inferior. Even though this kid has like mad superpowers, he still like looks down on him and stuff. And how infuriating that can be for somebody, because that's the other thing that you see with like those sorts of people and why they get upset in the media because they're so used to the world that's been crafted for them, like
Yeah.
placating them, like being built around them, that when reality checks them, you get these tantrums, you get these despots that come out of it and stuff, and like that to me is an interesting conflict because it's like, are you a villain? Are you an idiot? Like, what are you? But you are
Mhm.
definitely like in my way. You're definitely an antagonist to me, you know. And like, how do you deal with that sort of character? And I even at the end of that book try to like set up like a real choice for the both of them in that regard, and like allowing them to like change course. Will they? We'll find out in the next book. But it's like it's one of those things that like I really look for in like character development as opposed to just setting up something two dimensional.
Got
Now,
it.
did I do it effectively? I like to think I do, but that's the
You do.
intent.
Got it. Got it.
Nice. So, what was that? How did you? I guess what was your first reaction like after the 3 days crowdfunding, um, and seeing that amount that you guys like you guys blew past your target.
They blew past in 3 days. I was like, damn.
So that was probably one of the wildest weeks in my life, not just because of the Kickstarter, but because we had gotten offered our first movie deal the first day of the Kickstarter. That's how
What?
fast it was moving. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have like a manager. I had nothing. I was just like, I just posted this like 12 hours ago. What? I don't know what to say.
Wow.
So I really had to tap my network of friends and stuff like that who, I knew worked in not just the comics industry, but entertainment and just be like, hey, I apparently need like a lawyer or something. Like, maybe I need to start a company. And I did all of that in like a week, basically. So that's what was really wild about it. And in the meantime, all this, my phone, like I had my alerts on for the Kickstarter and they were just pinging all day. I'm at work and it's just like bing, 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 bing. And I'm just like,
This is
like
good.
that's my mom or something trying to call me. And go look at the phone and it's just like money is racking up and I'm like, whoa. So it was definitely validating. I think that was the real and true thing behind it because you put an idea out there and I was completely ready for it to fail. I was like, I wasn't invested in the idea that like, oh, this is going to be something that like really resonates with people. I was putting it out there saying like, oh, this is a story I really want to tell and I'd like to make my goal, and we did far better than that. So it was really something that like I felt really honored and humbled by the fact that it went down the way that it did.
It's dope, man.
Yeah, very, very.
So, from a quick geeking out session, I know we talked about traditional comics. Are you into mangas or anime, the more Japanese influenced stuff? So, if you are, can you share a little bit of what you like and don't like, or what inspires you? Just to geek out quickly.
Into it, man. I'm just as OG with manga as I am with comics. I love that everybody is just now discovering JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I was like, oh, y'all don't even know.
That is a great
two JoJo's off.
You know what's so funny? JoJo, I feel like JoJo was meant to be black, and all like the way he dresses, the music, the intro, like he has so much swag. It's kind of just crazy.
It's funny too because it's like that's what I find interesting about what kind of characters resonate like with black people so much and stuff. And it's like you got JoJo, you got Dragon Ball and stuff like that, and you got Naruto. And I find it funny and a little disappointing because we're a lot more global in the world right now that like it hasn't gotten through enough to Japan. It's like, yeah, can you put some black characters in here or like just characters with different skin tones? So like as much as I love anime and stuff like that, it's been kind of like tough sometimes for me to get in a certain series like lately because it's like it better slap because if it doesn't, like I'm just looking at the same shapes and heads and faces. It's like you got to give me at least like a tight story so I can really get into it. So I have my subscription to Shonen Jump and like I read every Sunday. Sunday nights is manga nights. I catch
I love it.
Stuff. So I was on before that. Like I actually went to the Shonen Jump when they first brought their magazine to the States. I went to their launch party. And,
oh wow!
Like because I was like, yeah, bring in the big books and stuff. I really wish that had worked better for them, but I think the app has been like really great. For people. I wish some of the other publishers over there would do that as well because there's so much good stuff out there. And it's like I hate to be a pirate, but y'all ain't helping me. It's like I will give you my money, but like you gotta put it somewhere for me. But yeah, I was huge into Naruto like before I think it even like I was getting that on bootleg DVDs like before it was even broadcast. Yeah, I put my girlfriend onto it at the time, and she's like, "What's this?" I was like, "This is Naruto." You gotta watch it. And like that's one of those great long investment stories that really paid off, man. Like and paid off in a lot of intervals. Like some of the best fights. I finally started reading One Piece. I was late to that one because that one wasn't sticking for me.
One Piece is a beast. It has like 1,000. It hit the 1,000 episode like a month or two ago. It is a beast, but it's a beautiful work of art. I don't know how they're going to end it because I think Naruto ended really well. I think Naruto Shippuden ended better than anyone could have expected. So I don't know how One Piece is going to pull it off, but I was very happy with the Naruto ending.
Yeah, Naruto owed us something at the end because even I was surprised. You kind of got to the end and he was just like, "Oh, I guess they're not going to fight." And then Sasuke was like, "Hold up." And he was like,
we gotta
"Oh,
finish this. We gotta finish
dude,
this." I was
the
like, "Oh
last
my
man
god!"
betrayal, you dirty Sasuke." I was like heated when it first came out. I was like, "Oh, this dude, you finally came to the end and you still sold him out. You
I
trash,
know,
Sasuke."
I
I was like,
know,
"I
I
hope
know,
Naruto beats that ass."
I know.
So like,
But
But like, yeah, so like that, like, I like My Hero Academia, but I think it kind of fell off a little bit. Like it's getting like a little zany. It's giving me a lot of the same energy that Bleach did after they got
uh,
tired of it. After he got tired of it, like we all know when that
I'm
happened,
a
where it's
fan
just
of
like
Bleach
he
though.
finished
I
that
love
one arc,
Bleach.
and then I stuck it out to the end. But you
Okay,
know, you
okay.
was reading some trash like
Yes,
going
yes,
towards the
yes.
end, where you're just like, you're like, what is
But they
this?
but they're bringing
What
Bleach
is that?
back though. I don't know if you heard. Bleach is coming back.
I
The
like that
anime's
one
coming back.
shot that they did. Yeah, so I was just
Yeah,
like, let's do that. Let's do some original stuff because I was even a fan of GT. So I went to school in Japan for like a year, and that's when I like got put on the GT. I was like, I know it's not canon, but they got
yes,
some dope fights. You know,
yes, 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 yes. Yeah.
one
there's always good stuff out there.
one of the animes that I took a liking to, because of I guess the variation in background of some characters, was Baki. I was actually really
Yeah,
I,
Baki's an interesting one, and
I,
it has like a large
Maha,
variety of like characters. Yeah.
like seeing Muhammad Ali or Muhammad Ali and Muhammad Ali Jr. I thought that was very
That's
creative.
pretty cool. Yeah.
I thought that was pretty dope.
And Umami,
Yeah.
at least, son was pretty. He was pretty strong too. He wasn't just kind of some weak just addition, but he was pretty good.
Yeah,
But
he had his shine. He wasn't just getting his ass beat. I appreciate
That's
but
what I always love. That's one thing that I love about what I love about manga that I wish comics would do. I think comics, especially superhero or American comic books, they they there's no end game, and they don't the fights and all of the conflicts are just too quick. You know, where it's just like you could sit there if you were reading Dragon Ball, like Goku was fighting like Frieza for a whole year. Like in a month.
tell me about it. Oh my
A
god,
year.
episodes of powering up.
I
Now
know.
imagine Spider-Man fighting the Green Goblin for a year. You know, it's like the setups aren't as like epic, so that way when the character is defeated, you feel like some sort of like closure. And I feel like that's why these characters keep coming back because it's like oh, it was a cheap victory and stuff like that. It's like, but what if Pete was fighting this dude for like a whole like all across New York for like 10 days, and it took 2 years to tell the story, and then he finally defeated him after he killed Gwen Stacy, and then he like beat him with his own glider. It's like hit me with something gripping,
Yeah,
and I think that manga does that no matter what. Like it does, it takes something that can be like minutia and it makes it into tension. JoJo's very good at that because there's some weird like powers that appear in
Like
there, but they end
people,
up
like
being
characters.
terrifying. You're like, this dude just lives in a mirror world. What? Why is
Or
it
the
so
dude that has the
terrible? This is
bomb,
scary.
or the dude that had the little bomb that like detonates, and like his whole like thought process, like the whole setup. I was like, that was my favorite season, the one with the dude with the bomb. Like, defeating him was like kind of pretty cool for me. But I haven't seen the new Netflix version that they
Yeah.
recently released about it, but I want to check that out. But
Stone
there's
Ocean
one
is a
question
good one.
that
Like that's JoJo's daughter, and like that one's pretty tight.
was tight. All right, I gotta check that out then.
Yeah.
But
would you ever be down for a Netflix series yourself? An animated
Uh,
Netflix series of Black.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I've had some talks with like various studios and stuff before we ended up at Warner Brothers, and I think that there's always potential. Like, I would like to see a world where the Black universe is extended, but I also want to, again, because of how I am as a creative, like I do want to have like put a bow on it and then see
Yeah.
like what comes out of that, and it can be a different interpretation of it. It could be something like completely new for like TV, and I would be fine with that, and maybe
Yeah.
I'd write it, and that could be fun, but I definitely think that when it comes to like these things, it doesn't always have to be like definitively like a certain thing, again, like in this whole like movie process and stuff, I've seen versions of my idea where I'm just like, oh man, that's tight. It's like that. That's really cool. I'm just stealing it.
But the one thing I will say, make sure you stay very. I'm sure you're very much involved, but you don't want to happen what happened to Game of Thrones your last season. If you watch Game of Thrones, so please make sure you're on top of these people because they.
You might want to end the conversation after I say this, but I actually liked the Game of Thrones ending
Oh my
because here's
god!
why. No, wait, hang on. Here's why. When did that show ever tell you that bad stuff wasn't going to happen to you emotionally? That show never gave. That show. That show told you exactly who it was when Ned got his head chopped off.
Wow.
Like it told you exactly who it is.
Yeah.
It was just like it was like, oh, you think good people get things in this?
Yep.
Wow, this is Westeros. Chop. You know?
That's a good point. All right, I agree with you. I agree with you.
To me, I felt like that show delivered in that respect because even I, at certain points, I was like, "Oh, you gonna get it, John? Oh, you gonna get it? You gonna get it?" And then just like this mother. And then Brand, I was like, "This guy." I was like, "Man, he should have got yeeted like season 3." But whatever.
Oh man. Oh man.
So yeah, but the thing is like the fact that you guys have that reaction to me means that the show did have the desired effect. You know, that's what good writing is. Even if it makes you upset at the end, you know, that's the kind of stuff where you're like, oh, it's like I don't know if you knew, but like when Jordan Peele did Get Out, he had a different ending for it, where the protagonist actually gets killed by the police, and you know, he was just like, nah. And he changed it up. And that felt good because I sure when he came out, I was just like, oh no.
Me too. I was like, this, you gotta be kidding me. That's how it's going to go down, of course.
Exactly. Everybody thought that. And that's actually what made that really good because that he had that thought himself and he knew that we would have that thought.
Yeah.
And he knew that the whole audience would have that thought regardless of whether they were black or white. Because people know. They like to act like they don't know. But that was what that scene said. And then at the end, I was just like, standing ovation. I was like, yep, you choked her out and you got away. Whole movie.
Oh man. That's epic. Oh man.
So one thing that we always like a big takeaway we get from all guests is you know, when you're focusing on what you do, you know, your creative approach, how do you stay focused on the goal, like you know, the task at hand? How do you block out the noise? You know, block out any distractions, any hate, scrutiny? Like, what's your, I guess, method of staying aligned and focused?
A few things, because I mean, like I've had my like you know years where I was definitely distracted by that because when we first launched Black, you know, it was all love and positive, but then I think as it grew, of course, the haters showed up. But I think what keeps me focused is that you know I have objectives and goals that I want to see through, and their only objective and goal is to divert my attention from it with some like BS. And the only time that they should have my time is when I decide to have some time and maybe clap back at somebody. But most of the time, I'll just read it and laugh because that really is all they have going for it. You know, like people make fake accounts all the time to send me nasty stuff in my DMs, and I'm just like, you stop your day to make a whole new account. Have you ever made a whole new Gmail account? It's a pain in the butt. You gotta remember that account, the password you came up with, and stuff like that. And it's like these guys, like it's like you really waste your time, man. Like just putting your name and a bunch of numbers at the end of something just to cuss somebody out. That's sad. So I think once you put that kind of stuff in a perspective, it becomes a lot easier to ignore that stuff because you know that's a very small value for them. It's like that's what makes you feel good, I guess. Go on, you know. So that's really what helps me focus, you know, and ignore like the hate. But also at the same time, like we said, if you're not creating those kind of like reactions in people, then you know your storytelling maybe needs a little bit of a polish because like I find those reactions to be like, oh yeah, you're the reason why I wrote this story because for whatever reason, only black people having superpowers got you feeling away. I didn't put that in you. I didn't put that in you. Like, that's you. I wrote some words on paper and made a book that you don't have to read, but you decided on a Sunday to be all like aggravated. I can't do anything.
Awesome. Hey man, thank you so much for your time. This was one of my favorite episodes for sure. I had a lot of fun, a lot of good laughter. It was definitely a pleasure. The last thing that we want you to just do is like, is there any projects, anything that our audience should be aware of that's coming up? Anything that's exciting that they should be aware of? And how can they follow you and get access to your information, your stuff, your content?
Sure, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Kwanzer, Kwanzer. And writing, I've sort of taken a break from writing because I've been working on this blockchain project and stuff. And so that's something that I'm really into because I find that space to be exciting, even though
Definitely.
it comes with a lot of problems, but they're problems that need solving. So one of the things that I'm doing with this company Epic Geek that I'm a part of is we are building software that protects your NFTs from being stolen, essentially, and scans the internet for people stealing your work and making them into NFTs. So, those being two of the major problems in that space, I'm like, we can't sit there and ask people to like jump on board and you don't fix those problems.
Yeah.
So, it's like if you can right click on something and steal somebody's stuff, that's a problem. Why haven't you fixed that? So that's something that this company fixed because I have a lot of friends who are artists and they feel different ways about it. But that's one thing those are two things that kept coming up. People are stealing my stuff. And how is it that somebody owns this if I can just right click on it, and now I got a CryptoPunk too. It's like,
Gotcha.
so that's something that I'm really excited about because I really like when it comes to technology, I like things to solve problems, you know.
All right, cool. I'm just gonna put out a shameless plug for my buddy Durbin. He's coming out with his own NFT collection pretty soon. I don't know if Durbin, you guys want to collaborate or chat, but I'm putting it out there. It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be really cool. Cool stuff. Cool stuff.
It'll be
Yeah, I mean the bar goes up like every month, man. It's like one minute it was just like Bored Apes, and then like Invisible Friends hit, and I just saw one today called Sneakerheads. Have you seen that one?
yeah.
No, I haven't seen that one. I gotta check it
I was mad when I saw it because I was like, how did I miss Sneakerheads?
Yeah.
This is
out.
great. It's
Sneakerhead.
literally black people's heads, but they look like sneakers. It's like, so mad
Interfaces
at how
is
good
dope
it
as
is.
well. There's a lot of dope collections, but I'm working on particulars a bit more than a collection. And the real bread and butter is the DAO that the holders in the collection will have access to, and
Yes.
it will impact our community and the greater diaspora. So definitely we'll connect and maybe see how we could help each other there.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.